There you go. Finally, got recording progress. Hey, everybody, this is Mark Fox. If you don't know me, I'm the founder of Resona Health and the CEO, and I got a special guest today. I don't know if it's a guest because I've never hosted a podcast. I'm kind of hosting today. I'm usually the guest in the podcast, but we want to talk about a subject that's super important that I knew nothing about a few months ago called fulvic acid. So the quick story, and we'll get into all Dr. Stuart Hoover, Dr. Stuart Hoover. We'll get into all his credentials in a bit, but what got me down this path was my team, right? We're in the PEMF world and energy therapy, and they're like, well, fulvic acid, we need to look at that. And my first response was furic acid, right? I'm a chemist and a chemical engineer, and I'm hearing fuming sulfuric acid in my head. I'd never heard the word fulvic acid. So I go, I don't know what the hell that is. They send me, my team sends me some information on it, and then I start doing a deep dive into it. And this guy right here shows up everywhere on YouTube, some of them 15 years ago, right? And some older videos and stuff just talking about all of that and how powerful it is with PEMF as a complementary modality to put with the energy. So what I want to do is, because I was so naive, don't know anything about it, we just want to assume that a lot of other people don't know anything about fulvic acid. So it's Fulvic, I think. I hope I'm spelling it right. Fulvic acid. We just launched our own product today. We'll give you the history of how we worked with Dr. Stewart to make awesome formula. But let's start with the simplest thing of what is this?
Well, that's a great question. Mark, thanks for having me on today. And just a little bit about myself. I'm Dr. Stuart Hoover. I've been in the foundational and integrative health field for over 30 years. I'm board certified in integrative health and have worked with, probably 100,000 people over the years, probably 15,000 personally in my clinic. And obviously, we've kind of branched out more with our information and messaging to help a lot of people that are just on this journey of improved health. Mark, a lot like yourself, about probably 18 years ago, I had never heard of fulvic acid. I was at a continuing ed conference in Austin, and there was a biochemist there talking about humic and fulvic acid, these incredible little molecules that support cellular health. Well, I'd always kind of pictured myself as that cellular health guy. When people were coming in, it's something you and I have in common. I know the first time we talked, we really both understand that, our health is won and lost at the cellular level. It all begins with cells. To me, when we improve cellular health, tissues improve, organs and systems. So it's kind of a trickle up process. Well, after that conference, I remember going back to my clinic and that morning walking in and going past our $1 million product room where we literally had probably 300 products we were managing. And I started to really think a little bit about why do people do better on protocols and other people don't that are dealing with the same health issues. This was something that was always very puzzling in our field as, people would come in, let's say with diabetes or inflammation or other metabolic issues, and we have them kind of on similar protocols, but some do great, some don't do well, and some do horrible. Actually, some do worse. So as I began learning more about fulvic's role especially and how it helps to support cellular health, improve nutrient absorption, cellular membrane function, intercellular hydration, it really kind of clicked to me that maybe what was happening is we were missing this molecule. Certain people maybe were getting more and had better cellular function. Some people weren't getting enough and their function was poorer. So to me, what was happening is we're pushing all these supplements into the body, into the extracellular environment. And there's a term I coined, nutraceutically induced toxicity, which I used to see in the clinic all the time, where we're pouring all this stuff in because we're chasing symptoms and hearing marketing and thinking, well, this is what I need. Well, if the cell's not functioning, these nutrients can't get to where they need to go. And believe it or not, that can create stress. So let's talk a little bit about these molecules, because you're right, most people have never heard of this. And the thing is our bodies were designed to use these molecules. They're created in the soil when vegetation is broken down by microorganisms, and that creates what we call humate. Now, in the soil, these little molecules will chelate trace minerals and other elements, so plants growing in the soil could draw these up When we consume the plants, now we're getting all these minerals and vital elements in that are needed. And when you look at farming practices today, commercial farming practices, and all the pesticides, herbicides used, what we've done is basically destroyed this activity in the soil. So what we're doing today is we're engineering food.
Yeah,
We're
so
making
it's not in
things.
our food anymore, right? So
That's right. Yeah, they don't rest soil. They just, so think you go to the grocery store and you see this fruit and vegetables and they look really good, but there's hardly any nutrient density in these foods anymore today. And a lot of it is because this activity in the soil was destroyed and we're not getting these molecules up into the food that we would consume and in our body would do similar things by delivering the trace nutrients, trace minerals, other elements, and more importantly, keeping our cell membranes energized. I know we're going to talk about that because this is really kind of the synergy with PEMF and what Fulvic does today.
yeah, so it's not in our food anymore. It's just been depleted, like you said. And um, so what I'm going to butcher this because I don't understand it completely, but with PEMF, we do know this part. I do know, right? Is the voltage on your cells.
Right.
When it gets low, you get sick. You want optimally 70 to 100 millivolts on the cell so that the cell can allow nutrients to get in and waste products to get out. My understanding of fulvic acid was because it's like a super small molecule, it can be the baton guy or the runner to take some of these nutrients and be able to get it in the cell more efficiently. And it's something we always had long time ago before these farming practices butchered everything, like you said. Is that the right analogy? Is what
Yep.
fulvic acid? It's a carrier that's allowing stuff to get in better.
We actually call it nature's best transformer or carrier of nutrients into the cell. So you're absolutely right. When fulvic molecules, and they're the smallest, most bioactive molecules of humic. A lot of people hear humic and fulvic. They're very similar, but humic molecules are larger. Fulvic are smaller, more bioactive. So they actually cross the blood-brain barrier. What does that mean? It means they can pass all the way through the cellular membrane, all the way through the mitochondrial membrane, and improve energy production. So as they're moving through that membrane, they're actually increasing the electrical capacitance of the cell. So it balances that positive negative ion balance. So we can get things in like nutrients, water, which is important, and also release toxins like metabolic waste and heavy metals that can accumulate in the cell. So if you think about it, all of our cells are little energy generators, right?
Right.
So think of fulvic kind of like PEMF. It's like a charger that we kind of connect to the cell to maintain that high energy capacitance so the cell can do its thing because the cells can produce energy, they can repair, and more importantly, we can even get into genetic expression. Fulvic can actually help support optimal genetic expression. We're all encoded with flaws, and the thing we want our body to be able to do is have the ability to override that. So as we improve cellular function and mitochondrial output, which fulvic helps, it's just part of that plan of keeping ourselves well and letting the body know what it's innately programmed to do, and that's to be well.
I'll be honest with you. I stopped listening about 20 seconds ago to something you said because I got so excited in my brain I couldn't hear anymore. So our blue vibe, our PMF with 40 hertz, right? PMF and blue light that you wear in the back of your neck, as we have 100% success rate with cognitive impairment. The brain barrier thing that you just said, we didn't have fulvic acid in the formula that you helped us create, didn't exist until yesterday. We just now have it in stock. We've never run a study with fulvic acid using this device, and we already have 100% success rate. That, to me, I almost ended the interview so I could go run and start talking about it from that direction. But obviously, you and I haven't talked about that piece before. Is that theory? Should I be excited there? That would really help.
You should be extremely excited, and I'm glad you said that because I see so much promise for this. As people are using this wonderful technology you've created, and I know in past discussions we've had, how can we just support and enhance those benefits? And fulvic to me is kind of that missing key to so much of this, because anytime we can maintain that electrical potential to that cell membrane. All these other technologies like you're creating and using, I think are only going to see better and more far-reaching benefits, which is incredibly exciting.
So when people ask me, how does PMF or your devices work? And I'm very cautious to say what we strongly, the industry knows and what we don't know. And there's a thousand theories we don't know. The two things we do know that have been proven over and over is it, as we already discussed, it increases the voltage at the cell membrane. And the other one increases ATP, adenosine triphosphate, up to 500%. I don't think anyone in the industry argues those two things because those have been tested and proven multiple times. The rest of the theories, you get into some rabbit holes where you can get beat up. With ATP, I've never even thought about, is fulvic acid going to help the cell eat the ATP better or consume it better? Because we always say,
help it actually manufacture it better.
Oh, okay.
So we actually did studies in our clinic with like athletes and doing testing to show mitochondrial output. You think of the body like an engine. You can't change the size, but what you can do is change the output, like tuning. And one of the things that we were seeing when we would introduce Fulvic is their output would improve, which not only equates to better energy production, but also like recovery improvement, inflammation decrease, which I know so much of what you focus on is decreasing inflammation. So that's a big part of Fulvic. Remember when I was mentioning it crosses a cell membrane all the way to the mitochondrial membrane. So what we're doing is we're opening that membrane up to be more accepting of nutrients, key things, glucose, magnesium, and water. Sometimes we don't talk enough about the cell inability to be hydrated. When we lose that electrical capacitance, it not only affects how we get nutrients in, but how well we can hydrate the cell, which is important for energy production and moving things out. So it's phenomenal in what it can do. And again, I want to make sure people understand we're not talking about curing things or treating disease. What we're talking about is truly getting down to the foundational processes of the body and improving that foundation, cellular membrane function. When we can get things in, get the cell producing better energy, as we mentioned, that's going to move all the way up and just begin enhancing the whole body's function and improving it.
It's interesting you said that because a doctor, Oz Jackson, he's actually a veterinarian, but he made a comment years ago to me. He goes, almost all disease and everything that goes bad is when a cell divided, it did something wrong.
Right.
Right. So
Exactly.
at the most basic level of cellular stuff. Would it help with that, making sure it doesn't go wrong? Just kind of
Well, I mentioned earlier, when you think of, there's a term called epigenetics out there, and a lot of people maybe haven't heard this. I encourage you to research that because what epigenetics tells us, or what we learned in the Human Genome Project, is our cells are built to run healthy, to produce energy. But again, in our genome, we may have flaws. We may have things that we just inherited. Well, the body still has the ability to override that. And epigenetics are really anything that we're kind of putting in the body that influences the cell. Well, you can think there's a lot of things we're exposed to and putting in the body that aren't good. So if the cell can't thrive and function and produce energy, we're more at risk for these flaws to kind of become more pronounced. We're more at the influence of those expressing themselves. So yes, we can influence cellular or genetic expression by improving our epigenetics, and that means putting good things in like Fulvic, re-energizing cell membranes with PEMF to keep those cells healthy and thriving. And yes, that's been proven to answer the question. So we do have control. I used to do genetic testing in the clinic and I stopped because when I would sit down with somebody and show them their profile and say, well, you've got these potensities, and they're already overweight, pre-diabetic, it's like they just shut down, like I'm screwed. And I'm sitting here, yeah, I'm going, look, this is all your blueprint, so we know how to kind of navigate around it. And what I found out is really who cares? Because what we do know is if we can support cellular function, improve cellular function, then that's the best chance we have of the body obtaining and maintaining optimal health. That's the key.
Okay, that's awesome. So it's not a drug? How is it classified? Is it like vitamins or how?
It's a molecule. And what's interesting in these molecules, every molecule contains the proper biological balanced amount of trace minerals and elements. You know how we're running around, taking magnesium and
Right.
potassium and all these things. Well, there's all kinds of trace elements and minerals. There are over 70 that we need to kind of manage things in the body. Even taking vitamins. If you're low in trace minerals, taking vitamins is kind of futile because these are the catalysts that help regulate how the body uses vitamins. So most people we know are trace mineral deficient today. And it's like, okay, well, which one do I take? Copper, zinc, cadmium, what do I need? Well, the beauty of it is fulvic is already kind of pre made to produce or deliver these trace elements in the right biological forms. And what's interesting is fulvic has the ability to kind of orchestrate how our body uses that. So let's say we're exposed to, excess calcium or other maybe trace elements that are not as healthy. Fulvic can actually help bind and pull those safely out of the body. It's a dual role antioxidant, which means it can donate and accept electrons. That's remarkable. So, as it's moving through the cell and charging that cell membrane, delivering these trace minerals, dumping them, improving hydration, guess what else it can do? Now the truck's empty, it can pick up garbage and pull it back out of the cell, including heavy metals, which is a big concern today.
I'll probably screw it up. I think what you just described there was a redox reaction or
It's a
something.
redox reaction, exactly.
If I remember that from college. So, okay, so and we just because I know this is going to happen when people go look at our stuff because it's not going to be cheap. I think we're going to sell it for $45 a bottle. I think it's like a month or month and a half, and then you go to supply for the average person. You go to Amazon, probably get it for $12. But we tried to formulate this specifically for PEMF because you had all this history on PEMF, and even more specifically, the 1 to 1,000 hertz and stuff that we use in our devices. Here's the analogy I'm going to use. This popped in my head. When people say, why can't I replace the battery on your device myself? Because I don't want you buying a crappy, cheap Chinese battery and having it catch on fire. That's the correct answer. And there's little thin wires in there, the coils, and I want you inside messing with it. What is it about this formulation that we're offering that really works with PEMF that is, I know one of them is Fulvic versus the humic, the mix recipe that we have, that a lot of them aren't going to have that.
Right.
So if you can elaborate on that a little bit, because
well, when we were researching this, because this is becoming more of a household name today, more and more companies are kind of jumping in the space because they're kind of getting it that we've got to do things to truly support the cells, and fulvic is probably the primary nutrient to put in for that. So you need to look at a couple of things. This is a U.S. source product. That's very important. This isn't coming in from overseas because there's lots of material I've seen over the years being imported that's really what we call spent material. It's been exposed to heavy metals, toxins, and things. So we're basically ingesting that. So sourcing is so critical. We spent a lot of time finding a manufacturer here in the U.S. that sources this. The mineral profile and content, the percentage of fulvic versus humic molecules, there's various spectrums of that. So we really found a product that we really filled the bill for getting as many of those fulvic molecules on board as possible, because those are the most biologically active. So we want those coming in through the day. And Mark, when I think back over the years on how did we know this was working, okay? We used to do as kind of our gold standard testing called bioimpedance analysis, and there was a measurement we would take called phase angle. And I like to say phase angle is kind of a summary of basically the cell membrane's function. And it's not a very big scale, but most people I would always see on the lower end, which basically just told us the cell membrane wasn't functioning, it was losing voltage. That was an incredibly difficult needle to move. When I started introducing fulvic along with PEMF, now all of a sudden we started seeing that needle move. So we were able to actually, watch this in action. And it's like nothing I've ever seen before. So, we know it works. We have the right combination of these molecules in your product, the fulvic product. And I think people need to, rest and be assured that, we're not just throwing stuff out there. We're taking years of research. You research things like nobody I've ever seen. And I know when we first talked about this, I could see the wheels going. So we know we're delivering a great product. And, what I always tell people in my clinic, most people are spending $200-300 a month on supplements that probably aren't doing a whole lot for them and possibly could be creating even more stress on the body. I used to tell them, put that away. Let's start over here with this and just work on
Right.
this foundational approach. And you know what I would find, Mark, is most people began making lifestyle changes, supporting the body better, eating better. And guess what? They're not going back to spending $200 or $300 a month on supplements. So, even though this may seem expensive for what it is, I think in the grand scheme of things, to me, this provides quite a cost reduction. And when people truly understand the process and what we're doing, we're not just blindly throwing something in the mix and hoping it works. We know this is supporting cell function up.
Yeah, a couple of things you said there. When we got the delivery of it, day before yesterday, Gabby did whatever, and I got the spec sheet and all the testing and stuff. It kind
Testing is,
of
yep.
blew me away. It was more like rocket science stuff of the amount of parts per million, different tests and stuff that we were all doing. So we could go into phase change, but I don't want to because I don't want to lose people because I get a little bit of physics. But what does this look like? As you know, as a doctor, nobody's going to use it or do anything if it doesn't fit into their routine. It's
Yep.
just a drop or stuff that you add to water or food
You just
or
add, you just put it in your water. I do it a couple of times a day in the morning. Here's really how I like to use this. Is I tell people do it mid morning and mid afternoon. And why do I recommend that? Because it's a phenomenal electrolyte. So what it's doing throughout the day is it's kind of balancing those electrolytes. Keeping your energy stable. Think of it like we're just charging those cell membranes all day long. So as we're eating, we're hydrating, we've just got that support. And I found that just works tremendously. And I tell you, I have even seen through blood testing that it helps with glucose regulation.
okay.
We used to measure what we call A1C, which is like a 3-month culmination of how the cell's managing blood sugar. And we would see those A1C levels, leveling out. And what it comes down to is the cell membrane was functioning better, receptors were functioning better, they're picking up insulin and glucose better. So a lot of times when people hit that midday crash, you eat and about an hour later, you're basically in that food coma. A lot of times that's those sugar levels is violently going up and down. And we know Fulvic certainly helps support that as well. Super easy to use. I don't, you're not swallowing a pill, opening a bottle, just put a few drops in your water and you're good to go.
Yeah, and again, my brain just went tangent again, like the blue vibe, because we've had huge success with the vibe and our insulin resistance protocol. We've
Um,
never run a study at all with fulvic acid and insulin resistance. And we have people, that is actually the number one way we sell vibes to new wholesalers and doctors' offices is this is very typical. You said A1C, I think it's HbA1c, right? A1C, everyone kind of knows that now.
mhm.
Somebody comes in the office and they or into the doctor's office, they're doing their physical and they go, hey, the doctor goes, your A1C has never been below 8, it's 5.3. You finally started listening to me and you change your diet and exercise, blah, 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 blah. And they go, no, I started using this, snatch it out of their hand, and they call and they go, this can't work. And that's how we get wholesalers mostly now is through the customer going back to the doctor. So
Right.
does it taste, what's it taste like? Is it
To me, it's got just a light kind of salty taste to it because it's minerals. And when you consume minerals, if you're deficient in them, you don't taste them. If you're balanced, there's a whole way of doing mineral taste testing. But sometimes people will pick up certain minerals. I like to say it can vary with people depending on what they may be deficient or balanced in. But for the most part, when you put it in water, you're hardly going to taste it. It's got a very light, kind of maybe minerally taste to it.
okay? Cool, cool. And you told me this before, but I want to say it because I'll screw it up. What was the dosage? It's how many drops per pound per person?
Well, we're doing 20 drops, which is a milliliter, is a typical dosing. Now, I like to recommend in the beginning people doing 2 milliliters a day. So 20 drops in the morning, mid morning, 20 drops mid afternoon. And that's basically a dropper pull. Like when we squeeze the bubble or a bowl on there and pull it up, that's a dropper pull.
Okay, perfect. So, and you know, and most of our listeners and stuff will know this too, is like we're all about people and pets, right?
Hmm.
So dogs, horses. With dogs, it works well with dogs too, and you just put in their water bowl.
Yep.
And is there a dosing for a dog? And what have you seen would be what would they expect to answer it this way? When people start using this, what would the dog and or the person expect to see in their behavior, whatever, by using it? Because what we do with most of our studies, we have pre and post surveys that are,
Hmm.
subjective that they fill out. We have the Carrier Watch, or we have our bio trackers for horses and dogs.
Hmm.
That's the second thing. And the third thing we do is you just ask the people around you, are you behaving different, acting different, complaining less, right? So what would
Right.
people expect to see? We know what they expect to see with PEMF. If they just use this alone without PEMF, what's the first thing they might be looking for? Is this stuff working, or is it another vitamin I need to throw away, like you said?
Well, people are going to know by more energy, and more sustained energy. I think what's important, not like a caffeine push. It's like they're noticing energy is more spread out through the day, not these ups and downs. Mental clarity is a big one, and I think a lot of that just again from intercellular hydration improvement, better glucose management. The bulk of our blood sugar glucose is used in brain function.
Right.
So better mental clarity, less pain and inflammation is something I've seen. I've worked with lots of athletes that love this, that can safely use this because it's not a banned substance. It's a molecule. It also helps with improving immunity, deeper hydration. So people are going to notice over time improved skin health, hair health. And again, it's a phenomenal companion for the PEMF therapy. In animals, and we've used this a lot with animals in our practice. Um, Again, improved energy. Dogs just kind of more vitality, I would like to say. One of the big things is improved skin and coat health. I've had dogs that have had horrendous allergies and,
Right.
hairs just falling out. That's a big, probably one of the big symptoms of poor health with a dog. So that's a big one that you'll see. Fulvic also is doing some pretty remarkable things in the gut and helping with gut health and helping with gut microbiome balance as well. We could do a whole show talking about that. So, again, what I hope people take away from this today is the word foundational, because I love what you're doing with PEMF because I look at that as foundational. This is another piece to that foundational program, and we've got to get away from trying to manage things from the top down, because many times, the body is just changing slowly over time, which all begins with the loss of cellular health until it becomes a big symptom, shows up in an organ or system. A lot of times is when people are taking notice, which is kind of it can take time to unravel. But we always have to remember every single disease symptom, it all begins with poor cellular health.
Right.
So anything you can do to support cellular function ongoing. People ask me, well, how long should I use Fulvic? The rest of your life. It should be the thing you use every single day, and they'll truly see a difference over time.
Okay. Thank you. So going back real quick, just the dosage for a dog or something.
Yep.
Is it critical? Or can they just put a dropper in their bowl and
They
or do
can
you,
just put a couple of drops per 5 pounds in the bowl. That's all you
okay.
need, with the dogs. Very easy. And dogs love it. Most dogs are deficient in trace minerals too. And the one thing about animals is they'll go to things they need, like eating grass, dirt, things like that. So we found, I haven't found a pet yet that wouldn't take it in their water.
Okay. And horses, I assume we can't use it because it'd be too cost prohibitive because of the
No, you certainly can use it, but that's something we've talked about because I have worked with people in the equine industry, and they use
okay.
humic and fulvic a lot. And I will just tell you, in that space, they tend to lean a little bit more even with humic because of the gut problems with horses, because the humic molecule works primarily in the gut. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier.
Oh, okay.
Fulvic, the reason we like pairing it with PEMF is we're ensuring it's getting across that blood-brain barrier to truly support cellular health all the way down to the mitochondrial level.
Cool. That was awesome. I think I asked everything that I think most people would ask. Any last comments or something that somebody, again, who's never heard of it, Like we
Well,
all,
I know, we hear stuff every week coming out, the new magic, pill and things. And, like, as I mentioned before, I've worked with everything and anything over, 30 years. And used to be the guy people would come in and they'd leave with 10 or 12 products in their clinic. And over the years, as I began learning more about the importance of fulvic, many times we would just start people with fulvic for 3 or 6 months. It's like we're not even bringing anything else in until we can ensure that we're getting cellular foundational health improved. And I think that's the biggest takeaway today. Why, people are buying something and going, well, this isn't working. It worked for my brother or sister or friend, and I'm not seeing the benefit. Remember, it all comes down to how well those cells are functioning. So this is kind of like an insurance policy to really know you're doing the right thing to support cellular health. And you know what? When we can do that, Mark, we don't need a lot of other things.
all right, perfect. That's a good way to end it.
Yep.
Thank you so much for your time as always.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
All right, bye-bye.